G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to go through about, as the title says, what's the best caliber to shoot to a mile. And a couple of details I want to touch on there to start off with. One is the word caliber is something that is a bit of slang that we use in the firearm industry because the term caliber actually means the bore. So a 30 cal rifle is actually lots and lots of different rifles. That's a 300 blackout out to a 300 drum or a 300 lapel or all the different variations in between. What we're really talking about is the cartridge or the chambering of the rifle. Won't get more confusing. I will use caliber like everyone else does, but just for those people who understand the dictionary, we're using it a bit wrong. Okay, next level I'll get into with it is listen, it's not a simple question that people think. What is the best caliber? Because there's obviously one. There's obviously a secret answer that people aren't telling you. No, it's not the case at all. It comes down to all the details, and that's probably normally my answer, and what I'd give is it comes down to the details. So what are some of the details? One is what you're actually doing shooting to a mile is different for many things. Now, if you're talking about hunting, then you're outside of the brackets of where I go. In my mind, it's unethical. Once you've got more than 1 second of flight time of your bullet, you've got too much chance of the animal that you're hunting moving, and then talking about a injury, and you're too far away to do anything about it. So in my mind, there's not much more than ego or impatience involved in a shot at that sort of distance. So I call that unethical. I'll leave that for you, but I stay clear of that sort of stuff. If you're talking about effective ranges of a caliber, then we're talking about, in a military sense, once again, out of my school of things, but really you go into what is effective ranges, which changes things around quite a bit. I would use the term effective in a target sense for how you can get onto target and what sort of groups you can hold down and that side of things. And that's where I'm coming from. This is target shooting. We're largely extreme range shooters. 1 mile isn't extreme range in a lot of the stuff we do, but it is for a lot of people. And then I'll come into the details of it. Now, actually, one of the nicest calibers to use in that sort of thing can come right down to the likes of the 6.5 Creedmoor. I've shot from 95 grain 243s and 80 grain 223s out to that sort of out to a mile without any problems whatsoever. I shouldn't say without any problems, with moderate ease. But the conditions and what you're trying to do with it are really, really important. Now that moves into, if you're trying to get the absolute best group, a lot of people would think, well, bigger is better in that form. Isn't it faster and bigger, so it's more efficient and the maths are better, and everything's better, so it's going to punch through the wind and it's going to be able to get on target and group more accurately at that sort of distance. So you go bigger. So why wouldn't you go with, the 338 as a minimum, but the 375 shy attacks or the 416s and things, because I want to go to a mile. Well, there's a fundamental that's actually wrong in that occasion, and that is both on skill and on ease and on money, so all on, not just both. All those things are compromised when you go bigger. It's going to cost you more. It's going to take more ability and more complete concentration. You're going to need a bigger, better setup rig to shoot a big caliber well. You'll notice this, if you come back to a 100-yard range and actually watch people shooting some of the big calibers 100 yards, and a lot of guys saying, oh, the bullet hasn't stabilized properly and things, so it doesn't get better than an 1.5 inch group in here. It's really out further where it starts to dial in. Well, there can be a little bit of that, but there's a little bit of simply that rifle is shoving around more, and that's why it doesn't shoot as accurately. And you sit behind, at 100 yards, you can sit behind a little 6.5 Grendel or a 22 Hornet or a whatever it is, and little guns that have very little shove, and see these ridiculously small groups, and these big rifles that don't shoot so well at there, and they talk about the bullet hasn't stabilized. Like I said, a little bit of that, but it's actually how the rifle shoots. And you'll find the same thing at a mile. where in the right conditions, and it is condition based to a degree, but in the right conditions, there's these ridiculously small groups showing up. I've certainly seen many times a 4-inch and a 6-inch group at a mile with a little caliber, which is a lot harder to pull off with the big caliber because the rifle's moving around more and shoving more and that side of things. But there are some conditions, and conditions are a couple of things. Conditions, obviously, the wind to a degree, and the faster and the more efficient, the more mathematical and practical ability the bullet has to deal with a certain amount of wind. It's still moved more. It's not what people think it is. It's not like get a bullet, a 3.5 feet per second, 1 BC bullet, and it just cuts through like a laser beam. No, not at all. There's a little bit of an advantage, but you're talking 10 to 15% advantage, that if you are not getting that same advantage in your actual group, well, it's a lose. So it's not as much as people think, I'd have to say. You still have bullet drop, you still have wind, you still have all those bits and pieces. But there is other places where if you have your vision is probably the big deal I'm talking about here. So if you're shooting into a green, grassy, wet bank and you have a target and really all you can see is your impacts, then seeing the misses is very important. And then a little 140 grain or a 95 grain or whatever it is weight bullet, you can't see when it hits the grass, you can't see anything. So then you need more power and more speed to make more splash so you can move yourself on the target. That affects everywhere out from 800 yards, that's effective. But the further out, the more that becomes a relevant detail, the size and what you're shooting into. Nice dry dust or sand or something that makes the misses, the off-target impacts, visible, then the smaller you can go, and then you find that then the consistency and the niceness, the less recoil urge, the more stable the gun, the better. Money can also answer this to a degree. You have a super big, heavy, giant rig with lots of weight and lots of money and big ammunition with lots of cost involved as well, and lots of skill and lots of loading and all those details. But then that can answer things to a degree as well. So a degree, money and effort can remedy that. Shooting on paper, similar sort of thing. If you're trying to get paper, trying to see things, you've really gone too far, but a lot easier with bigger holes. At a mile with probably, it's a conversation back in the thousands and things like that, but still similar sort of things involved. There's another detail which I would bring into it, which I think is a super important part of this, is that what we're doing this for is enjoyment largely. You know, there's a challenge, there's the listening to the challenge of it, there's the enjoyment of it, there's trying to grow our skills and that sort of stuff. And in that case, you take a 308 and try and shoot it to a mile and try and get it to perform with all the inefficiencies. And we know that it's not as efficient as a 6.5 Creedmoor, and certainly nowhere near to a 300 Win Mag or all those sort of things in that side of things. And you can pick stuff that is then, the 300 Win Mag I mentioned, or the 7mm Rem Mag, very good at that sort of stuff. Really great to shoot, really efficient, do that job very easily, and a really good choice for trying to lift up and shoot better. But then, you know, to compete, taking a 308 to that place and making it do that job, it takes more skill. You learn a lot more trying to read the wind and that sort of stuff. It can still do it quite well, actually. But it is certainly not as mathematically as efficient, and in conditions and things, still a big enough bullet to see largely your impacts. In most cases, you're going to be able to see that sort of thing, but it does take a lot of skill. You've got to read the wind. It gets pushed around a lot more. So I suppose that's where it is. What I'm really saying is exactly what I said. There isn't a right choice. For the most efficient in that sort of place, then yes, I would start to steer in that 7mm Rem Mag, so a Magnum cartridge with a good bullet in it. So whether that's even the 6mm and the 6mm SAWM that we shoot, or we're talking the 7mm in the Magnum cartridges, so 7mm SAWM, 7mm with the Rem Mag, the 300 Win Mag, the 300 PRC, you know, those sort of things I think are probably in the balanced place where that's really good, but 6.5 Creedmoor does really well in that sort of place. It probably is going to be outpegged with the right shooter and the right setup by a 7mm Rem Mag, but it can still be really effective at that sort of stuff. And you have to keep in mind what you're trying to do. If you want to do that all the time and you want to be most competitive all the time and you're in a mile, that's where you really shoot, a mile a little bit further, then I would probably start in, well, I would start in the Magnum cartridges. Whether that's a 6.5 PRC or that's a 7mm Rem mag or that's a 300 Win mag or that's a 300 PRC is probably where I would start, because that's where your meat and potatoes is. That's where you do most of your work. If really going out to a mile, but your meat and potatoes, where you do most of your work is 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards, that sort of stuff, then I would go with a 6.5 Creedmoor, a 7mm 08, that sort of thing is where I would tend to go. If really that's just the beginning of things and you're heading further, it's a mile to 2 miles is where you got to do your work, then yes, you start to go up further, and then you're going into your 300 rums, your 338 purs, you're moving into even your bigger ones, your Shitex and things like that. But it's more about the fact that your real work is up here, is where your real decision is. My honest call with all these things is, why would you just want one caliber, or one chambering? I would tend to have a few. I think there's obviously you're spending more money, so I suppose that's a negative to that side of things. My way of looking at things is, if you get one and shoot a lot, you're wearing it out, so you're buying another one anyway. So if you have 2 or you have 3 and you have ones that really can be, at some cases you're stretching that cartridge out to go to that distance, at other cases you're using a bit more than you need, but that varying, that changing of thing, I think is a good way to build skill. I tend to find I learn more while I'm doing more, rather than shooting one thing all the time and getting into that groove. It can build complacency a little bit. It's in some places you just know everything about it to get it. I suppose I'm talking about me more there. I prefer to have to learn by various ways of doing things. I'll also intend to engage handguns and lever actions and offhand and prone and more. That tends to help everything, builds everything for me. But I'll stop talking about that. That's another conversation. So like I said, what it comes down to is there isn't a right answer. It is very detail orientated. It's a little bit like another question I get, which is, I've got this caliber rifle, what scope should I put on it? It doesn't work that way. You don't get a scope to suit a rifle. You get a scope to suit what you're doing, and it's the same sort of conversation as to the caliber, but the caliber that you're actually getting, the chambering that you're actually getting, is little varied in its choice. Very much conditions, very much about the rest of the conversation that you're making sense of, but I hope that video gives you some ideas and some help with that question, which means that you've got to do the research. Last thing I'd say on that, whenever you do this sort of stuff, whenever you're asking these sort of questions and going down this road, you have to factor all those details in as to what the real thing is. But you need to keep in mind, you should do a certain amount yourself. Get yourself a ballistic app on your phone, look it up on the computer, look through those things and work out things, keeping in mind that effective range and subsonic, the transonic zone, I've got videos on that. I largely keep that out of the conversation. It's not relevant with most good bullets and most target shooting in the ELR world. It's not something I factor into. It's not something I bother about. All my ELR stuff is beyond that, and you sort of see the results you can achieve. But listen, don't factor that in. Anyway, guys, that's about what I can tell you. Hope that's some help. Thanks for checking in on us. I should say, for those people that don't know, we are not a sponsored channel. This information is given to you by what we try and do to try and help the shooting community. So we really appreciate your support in all forms. So subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, then subscribe. Hit that bell so you get notifications so that you get to see our new videos, our latest releases and that side of things. And if you can support us, as said, we are not supported. We get, we're not sponsored. We get very little, very, very little from YouTube side of things. So we're not a rich YouTuber or anything like that. So if you can support us, there's a link below to our PayPal email below for people who know how to do that side of things. There is, if you go to the icon and click on that, that'll take you to our channel page. And on our channel page, you'll see there is a little icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the banner. There's a PayPal icon, that will take you to a place where you can even do monthly subscription if you want to, and then also you can go to our web store where we have items of our long range shooting sort of stuff. We also have support bits for people who want to do it that way, where you can do it directly through the store. But listen, all support is very much appreciated, very much needed, and very much appreciated, and even the moral support, yeah, like I said. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.